Broadcasting live. Good afternoon, Blockhead Nation. Thank you for stopping by once again. You are listening to, or possibly watching, your favorite Blockhead, the only podcast in the podcasting world that can somehow incorporate the Peanuts comic strip 1 minute and then be talking about MMA and warriors inside the octagon the next. I am your host. My name is Brian Little, and today we are stopping the presses. We are rolling out the red carpet. We have got a wonderful guest who is joining me today. Let me tell you how it happened. Blockhead was sitting there in the pumpkin patch. He's been trying to create a tracker app for the Great Pumpkin, just like Santa Claus, but to no avail because I'm not that tech savvy. And out of nowhere, I get this email. And what do you know? It's her. It's the Peppermint Patty. The Peppermint Patty from the TV series wanted to come by and talk to this little podcaster. I cannot tell you how incredibly excited and humbled I am that she would take a few minutes out of her day to come by and talk to this little podcaster. Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I give you the one, the only, Miss Patricia Hatz, the Peppermint Patty. Miss Patricia, thank you so much for coming by today, and welcome to the Blockhead Hour.
Well, thank you so much. That was quite the intro. I feel important.
I can't tell you how much I have looked forward to this, Miss Patricia, and it's just as a Peanuts fan growing up, it's such an honor to be speaking to you today. And what I would like to do for my listeners that are the Blockhead Nation, for those who don't know, you actually started your career in an iconic role that a lot of people are familiar with. You actually played the role of Annie, to which I understand Charles Schultz, aka Sparky, became interested in you. If you could just start walking my listeners through your Peanuts career and how it all began.
Well, so I actually started acting at about the age of 3. My whole family did theater. When we moved out to California, we got involved in a local theater group. It was called The Jesters. And we did everything. We made costumes, we sold concessions, we sold tickets, we built sets. I remember being about 6 or 7 years old and standing backstage of The Sound of Music and making the thunder with a giant piece of metal that could slice your hand open.
Oh,
And
wow.
like we did everything, including a ton of plays, so that by the time I auditioned for Annie, I had done dozens and dozens of shows. We Once I got the part, we went up and toured in San Francisco, which is of course where Sparky lived. He was in Santa Rosa, and so he came to see the show. And the story is that he came one night and Lee Mendelsohn, the producer of Peanuts, came another night, and they got on the phone together and said, "Hey, I've got our next Patty. No, 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 no. I've got our next Patty. No, wait till you hear this girl." And they were fighting over me.
Mm-hmm.
So somehow they got a hold of my people. I'm not even sure who my people were or how I could have gotten a hold of them back in those days, but
Yeah.
they offered me the role, and of course I jumped at it because I'd been watching Peanuts for years. By that point, it was a favorite of our household. My mom would go out every time, and she would get Jiffy Pop popcorn. Do you remember Jiffy Pop?
Slightly.
Okay.
That,
So for your viewers who might be a little younger and maybe not
sure.
know Jiffy Pop, it comes in a little well, do I have one? No. Comes in a little silver um pie tin,
Oh,
and
yeah. Yeah.
pop off, and you put it on your stove and you shake it
Okay.
while you're making it, and it would puff up this tinfoil top until it was ready. And so my mom always bought Jiffy Pop popcorn and whatever our favorite candy was. And, I was one of 5 kids, so we didn't have a lot of candy in the house.
Mm.
But for the Thanksgiving and the Christmas and the Halloween special and some of the others as well, she would always go out and buy whatever our favorite candy was. Mine was Junior Mints. And we would watch the shows. Um, so in some ways I got uh the importance of what I was doing. But to be honest, in a lot of ways, I really had no idea the impact that this show would have 40 plus years later.
Sure.
How important it would be to my life 40 years later. So it's been really interesting and really fun.
You know, the rewarding part for me is that most of these that you have listed that are on your websites, and the ones I'll direct my listeners to, if they haven't watched them, are actually a big part of my childhood. And that's, before we started recording, we actually kind of agreed that we would go through each one of these individually, and we'll start with one that has a great ending to it that I think maybe just resonates with me in many ways, and that happens to be the episode "You're the Greatest, Charlie Brown." So for my listeners who don't know, "You're the Greatest, Charlie Brown" is basically they're getting ready for a track meet, and there's one position that's open, and Charlie Brown takes the decathlon because Lucy kind of talks him into it, but Linus kind of says, "You might want to reconsider." He's like, "Well, it's whatever helps the team," which of course he's getting murdered every day by Peppermint Patty through the training process. But ultimately, in the end, you had him envision himself as the next Bruce Jenner, and he's running, and she's yelling, "Open your eyes!" And all of a sudden, he just runs out of the track. So, from what you can recollect, are there some fun moments or things that you remember from the showing of "You're the Greatest, Charlie Brown" to share with my listeners?
Well, so "You're the Greatest, Charlie Brown" was the first one that I recorded. And so it was my first chance to work with Bill Melendez, who was our director. And again, for those that don't know, he wasn't just our director, he was also the main animator, and he was also every voice that wasn't a kid. So he was Snoopy, he was Woodstock, he was Wop 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 Wop, which was a combination. My understanding was it's a combination of the trombone, a muted trombone, and his voice. And so he was hysterically funny. He had a if your viewers get a chance, you should track down a video of him.
Yes.
He had a great speaking voice. He was born and raised in Mexico City. So to start with, he had that very quick patter that that a lot of native born Hispanics have. It's a very, everything is said very quick. And so you kind of have a hard time understanding what they're saying.
True.
But then he also had a vocal pattern to him that was just fun. And so when we got into the studio together, he says to me, "Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to say the line and you're going to repeat it." And I said, "Okay." I'm thinking, that's kind of weird. Like, because I'd never done a voiceover before. I'd always done theater.
Sure.
At that point, I hadn't even done a lot of television. So, nobody fed me a line. So he says, "No, no, no, just say it exactly as I say it, okay? Just exactly as I say it." And I'm like, "Exactly?" And he goes, "Yes, exactly." I go, "Okay." And so he reads me the line with his accent and his vocal patterns, and I repeated them exactly. And he goes, "Oh, no, 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 no accent, no accent." And I'm like,
Uh-oh.
"No, I am 10 and I do know how to read." And so he went, "Oh, okay, okay. You just read, and if I need to fix something, then, Well, I'd been watching Peanuts for years. I knew because there is a pattern to that. Hey, Chuck, how's it going? Right? Whereas a normal person
Sure.
would go, hey, Chuck, how's it going? Right? But there
Right.
was this hey that they all did. And so, I just knew to do that. And so I got through my session in an hour and a half, and it had been scheduled for 8 hours.
Oh, wow.
So that's my biggest memory of that. I do remember they had some of the other kids there one of the days, and we did the background sort of, hey, what's everybody doing? Yeah, you go Charlie
Yeah.
Brown, that kind of stuff. Um but those the memories that I have of it are much more on that personal level um than the actual show itself, which I think is kind of funny. I need to
Which
go
is
and rewatch
interesting.
that one.
Yeah, as a viewer, that's pretty interesting to hear your side and kind of go, okay, would never have caught that just following the plot, I guess you could say.
Yeah, yeah. So, but
So
I had a
if
great
I'm,
time.
yeah, I'm sorry if I cut you off. I just kind of was making sure. I was like, yeah, that gives me that other dimension to think that through and go, man, I'm gonna love listening to you back and just imagine you going through the script like that. I'm 10. I can read. I can see the sass a little bit. That's great.
Little, little,
Um,
little bit of sass.
just a little, yes, ma'am. So I think there's another part of that when we get to one of my absolute favorites by you. There are some moments that actually will throw Peanuts fans for a loop because all of a sudden you can hear adults actually talking instead of a trombone effect. And that's what happened with You're a Good Skate, Charlie Brown. So I love growing up with that one too. But in case somebody doesn't know, don't be surprised if you hear adults speaking to Patty as she's trying to figure out problem number 6. So that gives me kind of a segue into your memories
Yeah,
from She's a Good Skate, Charlie Brown.
yeah, yeah. So I do have more memories of that one, for whatever odd reason. That one was taken from a series of strips. Um, and it was one the what I had heard about that was that they had been thinking about doing a Patty special for a while. And then when I came along, they were like, okay, now's the time. We gotta make this one happen. Um, and so there's little um in the series of strips that were in the newspaper. Um, she Peppermint Patty asks Marcy to make her dress for her for the skating competition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Marcy keeps saying, "But sir, I don't sew." And she's like, "You've got a sewing machine. Of course you sew." And Marcy makes a huge mess of it. And of course, Snoopy comes in as Snoopy does, and pins are flying and fabric is going everywhere, and he
Right.
makes the perfect dress.
Yeah.
Um, Now in the strip, Peppermint Patty had gone to Charlie Brown's father's barbershop, and he thought that Peppermint Patty was a boy, so she gives him a boy haircut. And so she goes to Snoopy and she's like, "What are we going to do? Like, I look like a boy." So Snoopy goes off and he comes back into the frame and he puts a wig on her head and it's an afro. And so she then goes in the strip, she then goes to the uh the ice skating. Well, she thinks it's going to be an ice skating competition. That's what she's been practicing for. And it turns out it's a roller skating competition. And so she doesn't get to compete. And she's disappointed because, you know, she thought it was going to be ice skating. Well, they changed it for the special. And they did have her um, at an ice skating rink. But the drama that they put into it um, was that her tape gets messed up, and you can't in competition skating, you can't skate if you don't have your music. And so Woodstock steps up to the microphone and sings the song for her, and of course she wins the competition. Um, so there were some pretty major changes that they made from the strip to the special. Um, the inside joke that they put in the strip, she gets the afro, and in the special, she gets the Annie wig because I was Annie.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And the plot
So
thickens now.
right. So the first time that I saw that piece, I was actually doing some recording at their studio in Los Angeles, and we were waiting around for somebody to show up. I don't even remember who, but there was an animator that was sitting there, and he was doing cleanup, making sure that everything fit together and the frames worked and whatever. And we start talking to him, and he says, well, would you like to see what I'm working on? And we go, sure. And he goes, now there's no audio to this. We said, that's fine. So he starts playing this clip, and it's Peppermint Patty and Marcy and the dress and Snoopy coming in and fixing it all. And without a word, he goes off screen, he comes back on, and he puts the Annie wig on her head. And my mom and I lost it. We were laughing so hard. And the animator's like, what? Why is that funny? And I'm like, because I'm Annie.
You're Annie. Oh my goodness. Oh, that
And then
is
he started
gold. Oh my
laughing too.
goodness.
Yeah.
I love that you've given that another dimension for me just because, you're right. I'm hearing you tell the story and I'm remembering about how she can't even there's no sleeves in that dress, so she can't do anything. And then even you have the sweet element at the end where Woodstock does play the full song. You got Snoopy in tears. When it's over, you can see poor little Woodstock is just sweating bullets. He's so exhausted from getting through that whole song. And it pays off. She wins the whole thing. But
Right.
I'll never see She's a Good Skate the same again, knowing that the wig is Annie, Miss Patricia. Oh, that's added so many layers to this. I can't even begin to tell you. What I would like to make sure that I cover for my Blockhead Nation listeners is
Yep.
also your co-host has implied in a way she feels like your strongest work, even though those are really good episodes, she feels like the one that you delivered the most on, that even
Yeah.
gets expounded on in You're the Greatest Charlie Brown, would be Bon Voyage Charlie Brown. So for those that haven't seen that, I
Yeah.
have, but my listeners who haven't, could you walk my listeners through a little bit about your fond memories of Bon Voyage and Don't Come Back?
Sure. Bon Voyage and Don't Come Back is actually a Paramount feature film. So a little bit different than the specials. They actually didn't have as many of the movies. Why do I think there's only like 5 or 6 of them? Um, and so uh in that one, they are in a student exchange program, and they're going to Paris. Um, what's really fun about this particular story is that it mirrors a lot of Sparky's um, life. In World War II, he was stationed in Paris, and so a lot of the bits and pieces, they stayed in a chateau that had been abandoned. And so he and his wife went back and toured Paris, and they took pictures of everything so that they could come back and animate those the chateau and the little bar that Snoopy goes to.
Where he
and
has his root beer.
where
Yeah.
he has his root beer. Eh, I personally believe that that is the greatest 5 minutes of cinema ever.
Oh yeah.
Um, Snoopy in the bar, knocking back root beers and listening to the music of the times.
Yes.
At one song he's, crying tears,
Right.
and the next one he's, dancing a jig, and the whole time he's knocking back root beers. And I just like it gets me every single time I've watched that special. Let's see. So in the story, they do the student exchange, and it turns out that Charlie Brown has a connection to the chateau. And that's why he got invited. And it's a big mystery through the show as to what his connection is. So I would suggest everybody go and watch it. Um,
Absolutely.
but it's a lot of fun, and as an adult, there's certain things in it that I didn't notice as a kid. There's a couple of sequences where they have car accidents, and Snoopy is which
He's doing the gestures.
he's doing
Yeah.
gestures, which are not nice gestures.
Right. If you look closely and if you listen to Marcy, somebody who is always so sweet and so polite and wouldn't dare go against the status quo in many ways, when she's over there in France, she's shouting some things in French that make you want to go, if I try to transcribe that, that may not be, it's kind of like, are you, you're seeing a total antithesis to who she is over there in France, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken.
Yeah, yeah. So it's such a fun movie, and I'm my best recollection from the filming of it um is the moment where I am on the airplane, and I'm back there and I'm going, "Hey Chuck, it's okay, Chuck," and my voice cracks. And
Yeah.
I did it, and they all laughed, and I was like, "Do not put that in the movie. Do not put it in. No, let me redo it. Let me." And they put it in the movie. I'm still angry
Uh,
about it. No.
if I went back and nitpicked it, I'd probably be able to tell exactly where that is now. And you know what? I didn't want to personalize too much for the Miss Patricia, but I have to now. That in Bon Voyage Charlie Brown, when I was growing up, there was a family video that was made during Thanksgiving. It was me and my cousin. We were sitting there watching Bon Voyage Charlie Brown. It was on TV, and I promise you to this day, I know what scene it was on. It was Marcy looking at Peppermint Patty saying, "I don't remember hearing anything about sandals, sir." I can hear it in the background. And I'm telling my cousin, it's Peppermint Patty. We're watching Charlie Brown. I promise you that that old
Oh,
cassette tape is probably broken or hanging out, collecting dust somewhere. But I can pinpoint that moment. So you have impacted my childhood in more ways than you may realize, and you're giving another layer to it that makes it even more wonderful and special. So I just wanted you to
yeah.
know how much this means, just having this discussion with you. But
Oh, you're
to be
so welcome.
fair,
I love doing it.
yeah, but on the other side is I know you. Other than that, you've done Annie. You also done some work with the Peanuts. But
Yep.
just in case my listeners are interested in going a little further, yes,
Uh-huh.
I'll have all your websites and all of your social media. But are there other films or other works that you did that maybe hold a special place in your heart that you'd like to share with the Blockhead Nation?
So the one that always sort of surprises people, and to be honest, it surprised me a little bit as well. I did a slasher movie in the 1980s that starred Richard Hatch from Battlestar Galactica,
Mm-hmm.
Sean Weatherly from Baywatch, Richard Roundtree, who like I think he won an Oscar, an Emmy, and a Tony. Like he was just one of those. Um, and Leif Garrett, who was a
Oh,
huge uh, pop star in the 70s. And we did this movie. It went straight to DVD. Uh, but it's found a little niche following. It's called Party Line. And the story is that this young girl, me, is calling a party line, which back in the day, you could call this group number and you could talk to a whole bunch of people. You had to pay for it, and it was very expensive. And so she is at her babysitting gig and is calling this number from the babysitter's house. And the the guy gets the bill and he's like, "What is this?" And calls the number and hears her making a date with Leif Garrett's character. And so she shows up for the date, but so does her boss. So she goes and hides and doesn't show up for the date. And when he ends up dead the next day, she knows who the killer is and how to track him down. So she goes to the police, which was Richard Hatch and Sean Weatherly, and helps them track down the killers.
wow.
Um, and I was at a Comic-Con one day, and this guy comes up and he says, "You are in my wife and my favorite movie of all time. We quote it more than any other movie that we could quote." And I'm like, "Really?" And he goes, "Party Line." And I'm like, "What?" It turned out that there is a company called Vinegar Syndrome, and uh, their goal is to save these straight to DVD movies that came out in the 80s because there were so many of them.
Sure.
And so they re-released them as a DVD and Blu-ray. Um,
Oh,
and he
yeah.
was like, "Yeah, you can go online, you can buy them." So I have them on my table when I go to Comic Cons, and it's like,
Ah.
which one doesn't fit? Because it's
One of
all
these
Peppermint
things just
Patty, you
doesn't
know?
exactly sit in. One of these things is not the same. Now that's interesting because I was looking for if you had other stories from Comic Con because I admit I've a lot of things that I've followed you on that I've done my research on have usually
Yeah,
been very Comic Con related. So
yeah,
that kind of just gives me that opening to say, okay, we got one guy that of all the things, a small minority of people are interested in this small niche down movie that you did. Go figure. You
yeah,
never know how people will be influenced by what you do. But
right.
are there other great stories that you have that are either from recent Comic Cons or the most recent one you've been to? Just maybe some stories from Comic Con. This should be fun.
Some of my favorites are the kids that come. Um, you know, uh, uh, my demographic for the most part is ages 45 and up.
Sure.
And I can be sitting there and I can see my demographic from a mile away. And but every once in a while there'll be a kid who saw the latest movie and got so enamored by them that they become Peanuts fans.
Sure.
And so those are just so special, such special moments. Because so much of the time they're the age I was when I did them. And most of those kids also have a desire to be an actor or to be a voice actor. And so, they come in and they go, "Yeah, what do I need to do to get there?"
Right.
And my advice is always find a local theater and do everything. Build sets, build costumes, sell tickets, be on stage, learn the craft of acting. And then, we have these magical things
Yeah.
that you can film a movie.
Right.
And I tell them, find your tribe, find the group of kids, find the director at your school, find your writers, find your musicians who will write music for your movie. Write a movie, produce the movie, have your mom make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for craft services. Like, just go out and do it. And let me tell you, it's going to be bad. It's going to be really bad, but that's how you learn. And then
Sure.
you do it again and you get better and you get more people in your tribe who want to be a part of it until you're producing stuff that people are going, wow, that's really good. And so meeting the kids to me are always, it's just really special to me. And then the other people that have always really struck me are the ones who their lives were changed by watching Peppermint Patty. And you wouldn't think that a cartoon character would have their life be profoundly changed by a character. But in 1966, when she was introduced to the strip, there were no girls that looked like her. There were no girls in media that played baseball, played football, wore shorts and Birkenstocks.
Sure.
At that point, um, you know, pants weren't even like they were sort of frowned on. A girl couldn't wear pants to school. And in 1966, and it doesn't seem that long ago, a woman couldn't have her own checking account.
Wow.
A woman couldn't buy a house by herself.
Wow.
Like the 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 changes that have happened in our society are so massive in a relatively short amount of time. And what a lot of people don't know is how instrumental Sparky was to some of those changes that we see
Oh, yeah.
now. He was a vital part of getting Title IX passed. And for those that don't know what Title IX is, in the past, there could be federal and state dollars that could go to public schools and public colleges for male sports teams, but none for female sports teams. So if girls wanted to play softball, they had to raise all of the money themselves. And so he went with Billie Jean King and he knocked on doors at Congress and said, this isn't fair. Girls want to play sports and we need to provide them the funds to do that in equal measure to male sports. And they got it passed. And so when you're watching the women's basketball league, or you're watching the softball leagues that have become so popular, especially with the Olympics, that is all a direct result of his work, not only knocking on doors for Congress, but also writing a character like Peppermint Patty, who was so independent and fierce and not afraid to be a leader. And I have people come up to me and say, oh, well, she was bossy. And I'll say, no, she was a leader. She
Exactly.
encouraged Charlie Brown. Now, did she have her moments where she was like, "You're a blockhead, knock it off"? Of course she
Yeah,
did, because that was the character. But
sure.
it was never mean-spirited. There was a lot more encouraging of, come on, you can learn to swim. Let's go, ladies. Let's learn how to golf. Let's learn how to. And she was a teacher and a leader in so much of what she did. And especially during that time, you just didn't have female leadership. And so I am so proud of the fact that I am this character and her importance in so many lives. And I've literally had women standing in front of me, shaking and crying because they're getting to meet me because this character changed their life. And so I just can't think of a better way to spend my time than to be out and be at Comic Cons and meet these fans and maybe even introduce some people to Peanuts who maybe haven't gotten into them like they should. Everybody should.
Like they should. I hope you heard that, Blockhead Nation, because I'm getting goosebumps hearing this. But I'll tell you, it makes me so happy and just hearing that, Miss Patricia, because you might remember this. I even grew up on I Love Lucy, and there was this scene where Lucy got a loving cup stuck on her head, and there was a part where Ethel said, "I can't go out in my blue jeans." That blew me away as like a young 90, 95, 96-year-old kid who's not going, "Why can't you go out in your blue jeans?" It shows you the society and culture from just a few years
Yeah.
back. So hearing this, that is, it's incredible hearing that from you. But again, I'm so thrilled that Comic-Con has been a blessing to you. It's been a blessing to so many. And just to
Yeah.
know another layer of what Sparky has done for society and culture. I want people to know that so much.
Yeah.
You mentioned
Yeah.
something a minute ago about perfecting your craft in acting. It
Yeah.
looks like you and Miss Sally Brown are starting to perfect your craft in the world of podcasting because you have a show called The Peanuts Gallery. So if you could, I've listened to the episodes, a few of them in detail to get ready for this podcast. Hint, hint.
Thank you. It's
But
appreciated.
that gives me a chance to just say, hey, where are you currently in your podcasting journey, and what have you and Miss Sally Brown kind of worked out to this point? Where you currently are in podcasting, let's hear it.
Well, so I'm kind of new to the podcasting world. It came about because I would have these conversations with people, and they would come up to the booth and they would say, "Well, I'm a Charlie Brown," and I would say, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And they would say, "Well, I've always been a little depressed. I'm kind, I kind of mess things up a lot. I had my producer for the show, his comment was, "I've always been this close." And over and over people would come up and say, "Oh, I'm such a Peppermint Patty. Oh, my sister is a Lucy." Um And I really started to sort of dig into the psychology of these characters. And my dog is scratching at the door in the background in case you can hear
Hey,
it,
that comes with podcasting. Perfect time for that to happen, isn't it?
right? So uh just the it was such simplistic drawings, and yet these were really complex characters that, um, Charlie Brown often said, "I'm depressed, Linus." Um, and like I can't think of another in 1950s of another comic strip where any male character was saying, "I'm depressed." And I feel like what that did is it normalized depression. It normalized Linus's insecurities, you
Mm.
know, Lucy's narcissism. It made us aware of that type of personality, and in a lot of ways, how not to approach them, especially with Lucy. I really just got fascinated with the psychological aspect of it. You know, I've been through my own journeys of depression, and I've come to the realization I don't think you can get out of life without having depression in your life. I think everyone goes through it, whether you lose a job or you uh, break up with somebody or you lose your parents at some point. Um, you know, these are big, big moments in our lives. And for a really long time, I feel like we were told we weren't supposed to feel these things. Oh, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Oh, just get over it. You know, I remember telling my mom that when her father passed away, that, well, this is the circle of life, Mom. This is what happens. Your parents get older and they pass away, and then you get older and you pass away, and it's just the circle of life, Mom. And then my mother died and I crawled into bed for 3 months. Like, and I just thought, wow, what a
Yeah.
jerk I was. And so part of what I want to do with the show is really help people to understand that it is normal, um, and to poke a little fun. The episode with Allison Arngrim, where it's Lucy versus Nellie Olson, who's the
Yes.
worst narcissist. I mean, uh, it's a fun episode of talking about narcissism, which is not fun.
Right.
So you know, that's what we're going for in this. It's probably a little more niche than some other things might be, but I'm having such a great time. I interviewed a bunch of people for the co-host position, and I'm so happy that I ended up with Carrie. Carrie had actually done uh, the role of Sally Brown on
Yes.
stage a number of times. So when she sat down, she was as big a fan of Peanuts as I was. And it just, she asks some of the best questions. I tend to be very like, okay, I'm going to come up with the questions beforehand, and I type them all out and I send them out, and then she just comes out with these, you know, brilliant questions that I'm like, wow, why didn't I think of that?
It's a dynamic duo in many ways. Y'all have a really good flow. I will admit that. From a fellow podcaster who flies solo to co-hosting that y'all do, I see it. I mean, it seems comfortable for both of you, and the episodes have been so fun for me to dig into. So I'll plug that here. I don't mind. Blockhead Nation, the Peanuts Gallery podcast is in this show. All you got to do is go to the description of today's show, whether you're Apple, Spotify. If you want to go to my blog, it's yourfavoriteblockhead.com/blog. It's right here in the links in the description. You don't have an excuse. I've got the Peanuts Gallery podcast. I've got everything you need to know about Miss Patricia here today. You've got no excuse. So don't think you have to go looking for her. Your favorite blockhead has taken care of that today. So, Miss Patricia, I just want to make sure, since we've had a wonderful time here, and I hope that we've covered everything you wanted to cover, but this is the kind of on the back end. If there's anything that you want to leave my listeners to, if there's other projects, or if there's something, if they heard nothing else from you today, then maybe what would they want? What would you want them to know from Miss Patricia Pats today if they heard nothing else?
Well, I think, uh, you know, if they would like to meet me at a Comic-Con, to reach out to your favorite show and let them know that you would like to have me come, because that really influences who they bring in. And so that would be number one. I would love for them to follow and like and subscribe and do all of that fun stuff. Um, but I think the biggest thing that I want for the Blockhead Nation is to be happy, to be more Snoopy than Lucy.
Amen to that one. And yeah, I love that you said that, because you're right. Peppermint Patty was very competitive, but she
Yeah.
wasn't the crab. She was not the fuss budget that Lucy was to him. And
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said it. And knowing that Snoopy is the most interchangeable and really arguably I wouldn't say most important, but he certainly seems to be the most beloved, because I have a pastor who reached out to Charles Schultz when he was alive and said, could you draw me your favorite character? Well, guess who happens to be in a frame in his office to this day? Snoopy. So we can't overlook that in many ways. But I'll tell you, Miss Patricia, it has been a privilege and a blessing to be talking to you today. I just want you to know that from the bottom of my heart. The Blockhead Nation has followed me for years. So they always hear me from a viewer's perspective and as a fan who's followed the show for years. To get that other side and to be able to see somebody who's been in the trenches in the world of Peanuts, this means the world to me, and I hope it truly touches their lives. And everybody needs to go to the link today at yourfavoriteblockhead.com/blog. You can go to the description for Apple and Spotify. Everything is there for you. You've got no excuse. And on that note, Miss Patricia, I thank you for your time today, and I bid you adieu, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun being here with you.
That means the world to me as a gracious host. And I hope we can, well, they say mix it up one more time later on down the road, but we'll see how that transpires. But don't forget, every Saturday, Blockhead Nation, I'm here on the podcast. I'll be talking with you next week. We'll catch up in the world of Peanuts, but also we'll take a look at what's coming up with the world of UFC. Those are my friends that are MMA fans. We'll catch up on that next Saturday. Same Blockhead time, same Blockhead channel.